All right, welcome everyone to dot.LA's last event of the year. I'm so excited that you could all join us this morning for one final strategy session. I can't believe we are almost into 2021, but not a second too soon. Let's all be real. So back when we launched, we never expected to be holding all of these events virtually, but as everyone has this year, we've adapted to continue bringing you the most interesting content and exceptional speakers. So today we're going to be talking about 2020 in a reflective way. Of course, 2020 has seen the pandemic, waves of social unrest, emerging technologies take hold, and more. And we have a top-notch line of interviews, short though they may be, today to discuss those topics and hit on some of the challenges and predictions that await us in 2021. So first up, we're going to have Ben Bergman interviewing Mark Suster, the managing partner of Upfront Ventures, followed by me chatting with Emily Slade, who's the co-founder and COO of Valence. And then we are going to have dot.LA CEO and co-founder Sam Adams close us out with a discussion with renowned entrepreneur, athlete, and investor Baron Davis. So a really great lineup of folks. Thank you to everyone that has agreed to share your time and thoughts with us today. And so a couple quick notes before we get started. If you hear something that you like, please share it on social. Use the hashtag dot.LA session, which Annie's going to pop in the chat for you below. So you can grab that and put it onto social. And if you have questions, please pop them in the Q&A section below. We want this to be as engaging as possible, even though we can't be with you in person. So let's keep the chat going as if we were all together. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our senior finance reporter, Ben Bergman. So Ben, take it away.
Thanks so much, Kelly. And we're going to start off with Mark Suster, who I'm very excited to speak with. He was my first choice because he's so knowledgeable, insightful, and always very candid. So Mark, appreciate you joining us here. And you said on Twitter that I ask hard questions. So I want to start out with some softballs. And I think people who can see you on video have noticed that you're looking thinner these days, very in shape. A lot of us have gained weight and found it hard to stay in shape during the pandemic. So how have you managed to be in better shape at the end of all of this?
Well, judging based on you, I would say it looks like you're not in that category of people who's found it harder. And I feel like you asked tough but fair questions, and I like tough but fair questions. So listen, I started 18 months ago, not 6 months ago. So this isn't a pandemic thing. I just made a decision in my life to focus more on, longevity and being healthy. Really, for me, 80% of it is focused on what you eat, because working out, you can have an impact. But working out, the problem with working out is everyone who's on Peloton right now, there's a psychological effect called licensing. Licensing is when you do something good, then you permit yourself to do something bad. And just to give you some perspective, or at least for anyone listening, some perspective, if you work out reasonably hard on a Peloton for a half hour, you burn 300 to 400 calories. That's a bagel with cream cheese, right? That's less than a bowl of ice cream. So you could either stop eating ice cream and lose weight, or you could double your Peloton and go an hour or an hour and a half a day. It's just much easier to focus on the food side of the equation. So I started that 18 months ago. I realized that my portions were American-sized portions. And as I started monitoring what I eat, the weight just fell off. And then I added exercise to that. And obviously, pandemic makes life easier in the sense that I'm not spending my time on airplanes and I'm not commuting. So that gives me more free time to focus on me.
And you've also been doing something that can be in short supply in the VC tech world. You've actually been sleeping more.
I bought an Oura Ring. Again, this is a pre-pandemic thing. I ordered it, I think, in December. I got it in February. And I had attended a Coastless CEO summit, and they had a speaker. I think he's out of maybe Berkeley, I think, or Stanford. And he had written a book on sleep and how big of a problem it is for brain development and body repair to not sleep. And he sets the benchmark minimum at 7 hours. So he went through the psychological impacts of not sleeping. So getting the Oura Ring gave me data, right? Like, the old saying, you manage what you measure. So using MyFitnessPal, I now measure what my input is. And I realized I was eating too much. Obvious, right? with an Aura Ring, I now monitor not only my total sleep, but my REM sleep and my deep sleep. And I realized that deep sleep tends to happen earlier in the night and REM sleep happens to happen early in the morning. So because I was waking up too early, I was never getting REM sleep. Deep sleep is important for muscle repair. REM sleep is important for brain and creativity. And I just had no idea that for 20 years, I've been cutting that out. And so now I'm just prioritizing it more.
Well, it seems to have paid off. So good for you.
Appreciate
inspiration for all of us. Well, on to some of the fun stuff. I was looking back, Mark, at a story I wrote on March 3rd. The headline was "Top VCs Warn Coronavirus is a Black Swan Event." I quoted you in the story based upon the slides you were to present. In San Francisco, you said, we've been telling our companies to cut their burn rates, pad their balance sheets, and not to be precious about valuation. Survival is way more important. Sequoia made a similar warning at the same time you did. But do you think, looking back at that, it's been fair to say that coronavirus has been much worse than you and many other people imagine, but for most startups, it's actually been quite positive?
Well, it was a black swan event, and I think that's undeniable. The black swan event had positive and negative consequences that people are now calling a K-shaped recovery. So I think most people know this, but a U-shaped recovery being things go down for a long time, they take a long time, don't recover, and then they recover. Then people talked about a V-shaped recovery where things go down, but then quickly come back up. The K-shaped recovery, if you think of the side of the K, is half of the equation is doing significantly better than ever had, but half of the equation is doing significantly worse. And it's really sadly exacerbated inequalities in our system because the people who are doing better are knowledge workers and remote workers, and the people doing worse are the people who have to have their earnings from being in person. So one thing I didn't anticipate was what we've basically done is accelerate societal change that would have taken 5 or 8 or 10 years into 1 year. Think about this event right now. Think about the fact that we're all now gathering on Zoom on a regular basis. Every board meeting I'm on is this. It's me sitting, this is my dining room. This is where I sit every day. And it's accelerated that. And so it's accelerated the spend that people have in upgrading their homes. It's extended how much people are spending on telecommunications and making sure they have good internet. It's decreased the amount people are spending on travel. And increase the amount people are spending on food delivery, on things like Peloton. And so it's changing society, but it's going to change society in very positive ways. It's just very disruptive. For example, telemedicine is an area that's growing really quickly. And I think we'll continue to do so. I'm still very bullish on VR. A lot of people are not, but I'm still really bullish on VR. It may still take 3 to 5 years to get there, but what we've seen from the pandemic is it's pointing towards remote collaborative working.
So knowing how this year has turned out, what would you do differently if you knew, what had happened back in, January, February?
I'm not entirely sure there's that much I could have done differently. I'd say, honestly, 90% of our portfolio is up. 90. I've never seen it like that. I've never seen such amazing growth. Unpredicted. I expected it to be a much more protracted downturn. But if you think about technology bringing the future forward, that's what's happened to people. What could I have done differently? Gosh, I can't see it. I can't see not really much. Just maybe not have invested in any transportation companies.
But wow, 90% is up. That's
90.
impressive. Wow.
But it's not unique to Upfront. I mean, I like to think that we've been prescient and investing in great companies that, we had a pretty good sense on the future. Some great ones that are in Southern California, Appeal Sciences, you probably know them. They managed to raise $250 million during the pandemic. And one of the reasons is they help protect fruit and vegetables and give them 30 days extra yield without refrigeration. And, think back to the start of the pandemic, we were all nervous about how do we get food to our house? Like we couldn't have enough supply to our house. Well, here along comes a company that helps secure food supply chains, right? Like talk about a company that's been up and to the right. Another LA-based company, ChowNow. ChowNow has software that helps restaurant manage takeout orders or to-go orders. And, no one seemed to care. Restaurants didn't care about that because it was 10 to 15% of their business. Overnight, it was 100% of their business. So handing every order and losing 30, 40% margin to the delivery services suddenly didn't make sense for restaurants. And ChowNow just went like through the roof. And I couldn't have seen that coming. But it's changed the way that we get food and receive food in our homes.
Well, another thing we've seen very recently is these huge IPOs, which I don't think any of us thought were possible in the beginning of the year. You saw DoorDash and Airbnb, which both went up huge opening day. A local company you invested in, you mentioned telemedicine, GoodRx, jumped 40% in its first day of trading in September. What do you take away from those IPOs? What impact do those have?
So I take away two things. Number one is just how important technology has become in the market today, and how pervasive companies like Airbnb have become, and therefore how big the opportunity set is. DoorDash going public, and last I looked, it was roughly a $30 billion valuation. Postmates acquired for $2.6 billion. Like, these are meaningful numbers. And it sets up the opportunity of what we expect in the next 10 years. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity. The second thing it speaks to is the sheer demand there is for public stocks, because there's been a 6, 7, 8 year period of time where these great companies raised billions of dollars in the private markets and weren't public. And now a lot of them are shifting to becoming public companies. And that's happening through IPOs, direct listings, but it's also now happening through SPACs.
But I know our executive chairman, Spencer Raskoff, has been very critical of these IPOs, which leave a lot of money on the table for investors, for employees, in the favor of Wall Street banks. When you see a stock pop, 80% that day, isn't that sort of a misallocation?
Yeah, but honestly, that's a side issue to me. So the side issue is at IPO, who should have should there be a doubling of the market price, or is that mispriced and therefore the company should have raised at a higher price? That's going to be a single event in a company's history that doesn't matter to 99.9% of the people on the call. It matters if you are an employee of the company. Basically, so for anyone who doesn't understand the issue, if you could raise money at a $3 billion valuation and the next day you're worth $6 billion, you might say, why do you care? Well, if you raise at $6 billion instead of $3 billion, you're taking less dilution and or can raise more money, right? So the question is, the next day, who became wealthy? Either the people who put in the money at 3 billion just doubled their money overnight, or everyone who was already inside the gate not only made a ton when they went public at 3 billion, but they also got all the upside on the 6, but mostly irrelevant in the long-term scheme of things.
What are you looking for next year? It seems like it's going to be hard to top, but we've been saying that for a while, I guess, in terms of valuations, number of deals. Do you think it's going to slow down a bit or not?
I don't anticipate it slowing down. We're a seed and A investor, I think, as you know, Ben. So we're in the market to fund companies. Our median check size is between $3.5 to $4 million for our first check. And, in terms of follow-ons, we can do 50 to 60 million per company, but, 3 to 4 is usually our first check. And, we do about 12 deals a year and have done for many years and will continue to do in the future. The prices that we enter are certainly bigger than they were in 2009, 2012, 2015. So we have to pay more. That's a good thing for entrepreneurs. We have solved that by slightly increasing the size of our funds and just writing slightly larger checks. But the good news is the exit price that companies are getting are much greater. right? So our entry price is going up, our exit prices are going up. And I think overall it's, everyone right now, at least in this sector, the tech sector, the economy is winning.
In our first .LA VC sentiment survey, of which you took part, 25% of the VCs said they don't expect their employees to ever fully return to the office. Where do you come down on that in terms of how much of this Zoom life is permanent?
There's no doubt that the change is permanent. There's no doubt that we will, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't say, wait a second, like, one of my closest colleagues lives about an hour from our offices, and he came in 5 days a week. And for years, I told him, why don't you just work at home on Friday? Because he's a super productive guy. He works evenings, he works weekends. And I just thought it would be easier to take a day a week, but culturally, he could never bring himself to do that. Nobody's ever going to second guess that anymore. He's going to work home for Fridays. I'm certain of it. And no one's going to think, where is he? So there's going to be a balance. Google has announced that they're coming back to the office this September 21. And I think that's a pretty good benchmark for what people should be thinking, that probably we return to normal-ish life in September. And they're going to pilot or experiment with an idea that you can choose to work 2 to 3 days from home. I don't think fully at home is productive. And I don't think most employees think it's productive. So we're going to find a balanced life in which we spend a few days a week in the office, maybe a little bit more time at home, maybe a few less business trips, and maybe all of us can be just a bit healthier.
Well, something else that happened this year was a major reckoning for society as a whole and for VC firms and tech about the importance of diversity. Have you made changes at Upfront, and what else, do you think needs to be done there for both your firm and the VC industry as a whole?
Look, we already believed in diversity. We already believed that our partners should represent the way the underlying society works, not because we're do-gooders, but because the world is filled with enough talented people that come from diverse backgrounds. So it's not that big a stretch for me to find amazingly talented people who don't all look like me. So we're 7 full-time investment partners. Just for the record, 2 of them are white Christians, So if I want to say like white Protestant Christian being the majority of the United States, we're 2 out of 7. And I'm not one of the 2. And so if you look at the rest of our partnership, we have 2 of them are female. Kara Nortman, who's the co-managing partner of our fund. And so Kara and I are managing our
and was just promoted recently?
Yes. And you look at Kara's background. She's Princeton undergrad, Stanford MBA, worked 5 years at Battery Ventures, learned the venture capital market, has operating experience, worked at IAC, started her own startup. On paper, she's more talented than I am. So I don't have to stretch to have a woman co-managing partner. If you look at Aditi Maliwal, Aditi is of Indian descent, but grew up in Singapore, went to Stanford, worked at Google, worked at Crosslink Ventures, so had venture capital experience, was part of the team that helped source Chime initially, focuses on fintech for us. On paper, she's more talented than I was at her age. So I don't have to stretch. And so that's like the fabric. If you think of the kinds of people, we have Kevin Zhang, originally a Chinese background, moved to the US, I think when he was 9, went to Harvard, studied biology, is focused on a lot of our healthcare investing. On paper, more talented than I am. If you look at Kobe Fuller, African-American, also went to Harvard, worked at Insight Venture Partners, Excel Venture Partners on the growth team, was CMO of a marketing company. On paper, more talented than I am. So if you look at the fabric of what we are, we're already that. And then you take Greg Bettinelli, who is out of eBay, invested in Goat, invested in Ring, 2 great LA success stories, has proven a tremendously successful track record. And then Eve, who of course is the founder of Upfront. So even though I guess he's technically white and Christian, not American, so.
Well, final question for you, Mark, as we close out the year and maybe folks finally have a little bit of free time. You read a lot, you get a lot of books early. I'm jealous you got the Jared Diamond book early. What's the best thing you read this year?
Shoot, I'm really bad on the fly on names. I wish I had prepped. My favorite book was All the Light You Cannot See, I think is the name of it. All the Light You Cannot See, if that sounds familiar. It's a novel, but it's set in the context of World War II France, and has a lot. I'm really interested in reading about history from a kind of a historical fiction perspective because it's more interesting. I'm reading a ton of trade policy stuff. Great book recommendation I've been making a lot is Americana. It's the 400-year capitalist history of the United States. And I think people will really enjoy that. It's a highly readable book. I was just thumbing through my phone because I wanted to get you the name. I'm reading a book on trade that really has just changed so much of how I'm thinking, but let's see if I pull it up in time. But but the more that I read about global trade, here it is. It's called A Splendid Exchange: How Trade Shaped the World. And I have a whole bunch of books on global trade. In fact, this is the next one that I'm reading next week, called Power and Plenty. I haven't read it yet, but it gets very good write-up. But when you start to read about it, it will help frame how the world has changed over time based on free trade and based on what commodities and what technologies were changing how demand worked in the world and who gained and who lost from it. When you have historical context for what's happening, it makes you a better investor or a better entrepreneur for today. But people want to think that everything we're doing today is unique. It's not. It's all been done. There's a lot of guidance from the past.
We just put a link to buy the book on our chat so people can go out and read that. Mark, thank you so much. Congratulations on the success this year. Have a great holiday and a great new year.
Thank you. And to you, Ben. And thanks to everybody.
All right. Thanks so much, Mark and Ben, for sharing your thoughts on that space with us. And be sure to check out the VC report that Ben published today on our site for more insights. Annie popped that link in the chat for you so you can find it there. So now let's dive right into the next discussion. I'm very excited for this one, and I'm so happy to welcome Emily Slade, who's the co-founder and COO of Valence. Emily, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's just jump right in. So tell us about how Valence fared this year. I mean, this was an incredibly momentous year that you specifically were situated uniquely to take on at a very important time. So what was it like to launch at such a critical time in our nation's social consciousness?
Yes, so 2020, I don't think anyone thought we'd be facing all the insanity of this year. And, you know, for me, I feel like we were in a really good position to be of service and support the community, the Valence members. So for those of you who don't know, Valence is a tech platform and community that connects Black professionals with career opportunities, mentorship, capital, and professional development. And, you know, my co-founder, Kobe Fuller, Lemaire, and I actually incorporated the business on Martin Luther King Day of 2019. Spent the better half of 2019 building the MVP, which you see today. And we, you know, kind of beta launched in November of last year. So going into COVID, kind of the same, we were in the same boat as a lot of startups and a lot of people on this call, I'm sure, were, you know, like Mark said in the previous session, we were just like hunkering down. You know, we were basically wondering how we were going to get through it. And things kind of grinded to a halt for a second there. And it was kind of scary. And yet, knowing that we were in a position, because we're a community-oriented platform, to be of service was the thing that for most of our, I think for all of our founding team, if I can speak on behalf of them, was what really got us through that kind of difficult period of time. And then obviously with what happened with George Floyd's killing and all the social unrest that's happened as a result, everything changed for us immediately. I mean, we just pretty much just got hit from all sides, from companies who are looking to support their diversity initiatives and work with us in ways to figure out how to do that. From our community members, we saw our membership growth, you know, double, and really just realized that we couldn't have been in a better position to be of service and support. And that's what drove us forward throughout this whole year. So I mean, like everybody can say, it's just been a pretty intense time, but I feel, you know, I'm very grateful to have been in a position to be building something and to have kind of a small but mighty team ready to help, you know, move into action when our country and the world was really ready to move into action on something that, I think when it comes to DE&I, a lot of companies said that they were prioritizing it or maybe had intentions to. But what we really saw happen in 2020 was that the sense of urgency and the awareness and understanding across the board became really evident. And, just really grateful to be in a position that we are today to uplift the community and to connect everybody who's really interested in making this kind of change happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you folks are doing at Valence is so important, and it was kind of a nice segue, I think, to what Ben and Mark were talking about at the end, that there really is this talent pool. When people say, oh, I don't know where to go, my network doesn't look like me, you are really providing the tools and the space to find those people and also support those people who maybe they're not going to come work at your company because you don't have mutual interests, but you're able to help them in different ways. And that's actually what I love about what you guys did with the Boost Challenge, which I signed up after our conversation the other day. I'm excited to get involved. So tell me about the Boost Challenge, how that went, and for our audience members who can lend a hand, what type of boosts are most needed right now?
Yes. So the Boost Challenge came out of actually one of the messages that we sent out at the beginning of the COVID situation. So one of our executive advisors is a guy named Jim Lowry. He's a business icon, and luckily we have him on board as an advisor, and we had him pen a letter to the Valence community, just kind of a notes of encouragement, words of encouragement, of advice, and, kind of a moment to say, let's have some solidarity. We're in this together. And in response to that letter, we got a ton of feedback. And one message came back, and it was from a student at Princeton. He was in his, I think, junior year. And he said, all of my colleagues and I lost our summer internships. All of my family members and friends who just recently graduated college don't have jobs right now. This is a really scary time for us. And how, as the next generation of Black leaders, are we supposed to move forward in the world? Can Valence help? And we sat down together and we thought about the fact that, at the time, we were approaching around 10,000 members of Valence, and the majority of our members are, kind of skew a little bit more senior in their careers, have, earned their stripes in many cases and are willing to give back. And we thought, well, we have this feature on the site called Boosts, which is essentially the ability to connect people on the site for mentorship. It's one-on-one 30-minute coaching or advice sessions. And we said, why don't we just leverage Boosts and really put together a program that galvanizes all the support of incredible, leaders in a variety of fields to give back to all of these, in some cases, college students or recent grads who are really, in it right now. And so we launched the Boost Challenge, I think it was June. And we had a goal because we want to measure some things, right? We said we wanted to get to 5,000 boosts offered on the platform by the end of summer. And we had incredible support from the community, from many of our Spotlight members, which you can see on the site. Mark was one of our boosters. He's been giving a lot of great advice on fundraising and on entrepreneurship. And we are lucky to say and happy to say that we hit over 7,000 boosts offered on the platform during that period of time. So yes, and in terms of being able to support and to join and give a boost, please do. Everybody's welcome to do that. The more support and the more engagement in the community that we can have, the better. I think in terms of topics, definitely anything around fundraising, anything around entrepreneurship, also personal branding, and essentially being able to put yourself out there with the right kind of in the right light when it comes to looking for a new career, a new job opportunity. All those things are welcome. And of course, lots of other categories. But we'd love to welcome you and anybody else who's listening to join Valence in that capacity or as a member.
Yeah, that's incredible that you guys hit 7,000 when the goal was 5,000. Those are the metrics you love to see. Yes.
And it's growing. I mean, we obviously are still measuring that, but we were really excited to see that we exceeded what we'd put out there.
Yeah. Kind of now thinking a little bit more broadly about 2020, one of the things that I love that you particularly, but Valence as a whole, is just a focus on positivity. Because I think there's been obviously so much negativity, and it's really easy, regardless of whether it's our nation's social consciousness relations, what's going on with the pandemic, it's really easy to get bogged down in the negativity and feel hopeless. But the mission of Valence, and it sounds like you personally from just the conversations I've had, is to focus on the positive and really focus on bringing that to the community. And so obviously, after the protests this year, we saw a shift in individuals, in companies thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion on a much more impactful level. And so kind of thinking back over 2020 and thinking on a positive note, because we'll get to the negative, of course, because we have to go with the good and the bad. But what were some of the strides that you saw this year in the LA tech and startup community and the larger business community as a whole?
Yes, so I'd kind of break it down into 3 categories, if you will. So I think we saw, companies in general were pretty eager to make a statement or to get involved. And there's a distinction between those 2 things, right? So I think we saw companies who were, jumped right in and had something to say, and they made calls and they made commitments, and they were really, I think, well-intentioned, right? And then you had companies who jumped right in and made statements, and then maybe didn't make the calls and maybe didn't make the commitments. And then you had companies who have kind of stayed a little bit under the radar. Maybe they haven't said much, and TBD on those companies, whether or not they intend to, or whether or not maybe in some cases they're making quiet progress, they're making donations, they're making changes internally and structurally. So I think, actually one of our spotlight members, her name is Sherelle Dorsey. She runs a company called The Plug, which is at tpinsights.com. She's doing some incredible journalism and reporting on the Black innovation economy. And her team decided to focus on actually researching and tracking the companies in tech that made statements. And I believe, if I got the latest from her, there were over 200 tech companies that she tracked that made statements, and she actually tracks it. If you go to her website, you can see there's a database there. She tracks like what they said, what kind of commitments they made. And I think we're at the total right now that of those 200, I think it was a little over 200 companies, over $393 million have been pledged by those organizations to different Black kind of companies that are focused, or organizations that are focused on Black community. And so that's one metric that you could look at and say, okay, well, here's some progress. And I think if we look at, how does that play out over time though, right? And so my hope is that it's not just a one-time thing, right? My hope, and I think everybody's hope that is involved and interested in seeing the real change happen, is that it's not just a check kind of in isolation. So anyway, I definitely encourage everybody to check out TP Insights to learn more about her reporting on that particular topic. And then I also noticed that, I think it was actually in 2019, but First Round Capital did a survey, and they found that employees who don't believe their company is prioritizing diversity are 3 times as likely to leave that company within a year. And so it's interesting to see that even before the everything that's gone down this year regarding racial injustice, that employees were already saying this is something that needs to happen. And hopefully we've all heard that the actual business implications, the positive business implications of prioritizing diversity. But I think ultimately some great work has emerged. I mean, here in LA, you can look to organizations like Pledge LA. I think just this week they launched, what is it called? The South LA Fund, the Fund for South LA Founders. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you see some great work happening there. We launched an initiative that's focused on making sure that there are more Black board members on public and private boards, and that's called the Board Challenge. And that was in partnership with the Board List and Altimeter Capital. And we've seen over 64 companies take the pledge and are going to, be held accountable for hopefully adding at least one Black board member to their board within 12 months. So ultimately, like you guys all probably know, there's a lot that's happening, and I'm committed to, and I know the team at Valence is committed to helping to shine a light on those organizations across the spectrum who are doing the work, who are committed to it, and making sure that it's lasting change and not just something that, felt like they needed to respond for some sort of performative reasons.
Right. Right. No, and I appreciate you being so specific in all of the different things that you've called out, because when you do say it all, together in a couple of minutes, it is impressive the things that have been done. But like you said, there have been a lot of companies, individuals. I remember the day that everyone posted the black square.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was like telling the world essentially on social media, hey, I'm doing something and I've checked the box. But there are, now that we've had so many more other things come up, the election and whatnot, and we're thinking about 2021, some of that momentum is gone. Okay. Let's just call a spade, unfortunately. So obviously some companies, some individuals have dropped the ball. We don't need to dwell and shame them, but thinking more positively in terms of, we could have a Game of Thrones moment here, a Cersei moment.
The internet's really good at that, right? Like Twitter.
Exactly. There's already people that are doing that. But thinking now, okay, there's a moment to pause and reset as we go into 2021, make our goal lists, and hopefully they'll turn out a little bit better than the 2021s did. But what are some specific things that companies can do into 2021, and also that individuals can do? Because I think it can be very easy as an individual to say, well, at my company, I'm not a CEO, I'm not a founder. How do I make change? I'd be curious for our audience members and myself, is what would you suggest as we think about trying to recapture some of that momentum and make more of an impact in 21?
Yes. So on the company note, I think of it in kind of three areas. I mean, there's tons of areas you could focus on, but I think there's three that I can call out right now. And the first is obviously recruiting, right? So making sure that you're really attentive to whatever kind of like recruiting best practices you have right now, and also thinking about who is your recruiting team, who is on your team. I think it's something like 80% of all open roles are filled by referrals and current, members of a company. So if you think that, you want to make a change when it comes to diversity and making sure that your team is more representative of the general population, you got to recognize that a lot of the referrals and things that might come from your current team will probably not elicit the value, the same results that you're looking for. So I think putting some focus on the recruiting efforts, obviously making sure that you're recruiting from great pipelines and populations of Black talent. Valence is one of those options. If you haven't found us yet, you can check us out at valence.community, little plug. But I think also on top of that, you've got retention. So once you actually get employees on board who are of color, Black employees in the case of Valence, you want to make sure that you're providing an experience that is comfortable and safe and reflective of values that everyone shares. And so on the retention front, we've done a bunch of different work. We've seen lots of companies employ all sorts of tactics, whether it's, of course, diversity and inclusion trainings, but also like programming, invest in, if you have a D&I lead, or if you have somebody who's responsible for, trying to make some of these changes happen within your organization, support them, with your investment, with money, with time, and with your attention if you're in the leadership team. So just be aware of the fact that this is, something that, of course, depending on the stage of the company that you're in, if you're a smaller team, don't be afraid to take action yourself. Like if you see an opportunity to give back to the community, or to put some new policies or programming in place that's more reflective of the community that you want to attract, then do those things. And then I think lastly, and this kind of comes back to the idea of, making sure that change happens at the top, which is around the idea of promoting Black leaders and ensuring that there's Black leadership and diverse leadership, within the companies that are leading the charge. And I think as, in LA, we're a city of major industry and tech and entertainment. And as we start to see leadership change to be more reflective of diversity and of the world that we are, I think that, that's going to have a major impact on how the rest of the organization functions. And I think as an individual, it's one of those things where this whole year we've been listening, and hopefully we've been learning. I obviously don't present as Black. My mom's half Black. That's something that I think nobody would know about me unless you read my story or I told you, which I did just now. But I think being open to the fact that everybody has so much so many different, kind of diverse backgrounds, that if you just plug into that and realize that you don't know what someone else's experience is like, and as long as you're open to learning and you're empathetic, and that you take action when right action needs to be taken, I think that's what we can ask of each other. And I think that that's what we've understood throughout 2020, is that, this kind of change is really disrupting and challenging and sad in so many ways across the board, everything from COVID to civil unrest, social unrest, everything. But being a part of a moment like this is actually really inspiring, to be able to say that we were in a time where so much change was taking place, and that we didn't just stand by, that we participated. And I encourage everybody to be hopeful about that going into 2021.
Yeah, I really like two of the things that you mentioned around that mindset shift, because I think that that's really important too. This can feel very overwhelming, right? Of where do I start? Oh, well, if other people aren't doing it, why should I do it? But really thinking about that is you get to be part of a moment in history and really create impact. And I think that's something that's extremely inspiring. And I also appreciate that you brought up this point around how do you actually make an inclusive work environment once you get people in the door, because it's not enough just to be able to say, oh, well, we have a workforce that's X percent African-American, X percent women, when they come into these roles and people automatically think, oh, you're only here because we're focusing on DE&I. And that's such a toxic workplace, of really starting to think about how you can create a space that's more inviting for folks to, to reach those metrics, right? That you mentioned, that actually having folks in the community or in your workplace that are more diverse actually makes things better rather than stifling them. So we're running up on time, but I just wanted to give you the last word on something that we could go on for forever, but we spoke about briefly when we were on our prep call. About this idea of community and what does that even mean anymore at the company level, the industry level. I know that's a lot to tackle in the very short amount of time I'm giving you there, but just any thoughts that you want to leave us with on how this concept of community is shifting during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just, to sum it up and keep it simple and to keep it light, everyone's gone through something super challenging this year in some capacity. And so the idea that community could be somehow put on the back burner because we're on Zoom or something like that it's not true. We need each other more than ever. And I think it's more evident now than ever that that's the case. And I would say when you look around and you see opportunities, like I think it's unfortunately around 50% of Black-owned businesses are not going to make it out of COVID. Community is important. Being able to support one another is important. So prioritize it. Think about how you can give back, how you can be of service, and how you can be supportive to each other during, hopefully what is the tail end of a really difficult time, but, be hopeful at the same time, right? We got a great year ahead of us. I think anything's better than 2020. I hope so. I'm hopeful. I encourage everybody to just, enjoy the holidays, hopefully get some R&R. And thank you again for having me. I'm glad I got to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily, for joining us. I always love talking to you, and thank you for just bringing such positivity and your reflections on the year. So thank you.
Thank you.
And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over for one final discussion. We are going to have entrepreneur, athlete, and investor Baron Davis being interviewed by our co-founder and CEO, Sam Adams. So Sam, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Baron, so great to have you.
How are you? I kept chiming in and interrupting, my bad.
I think you're good. I don't know if that actually made it on stage.
So, cool.
Yeah, but we're really psyched to have you, man. We're just really thrilled to have you. I mean, Baron Davis, native Angelino, UCLA Bruin, NBA All-Star, serial entrepreneur, investor, just a huge pillar of the community. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, Sam.
Baron, I just wanted to talk a bit about kind of your role in the community, and then and your various things that you got going on, and then talk a little bit about LA kind of in general, and where you think we're heading as a city and as a startup hub. So I wanted to. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, just happy to born and raised here. I come from South Central Los Angeles, the worst side of the track. And I got privileged to have a scholarship to go to Crossroads, which was like the best side of the track. And I would say, throughout my journey, my goal in life, even as a kid, was to build bridges, to connect people from Hollywood to South Central, from Tech to South Central, Compton, Watts, really take care of, the underserved, underprivileged. And so I started Business Inside the Game, really to, create a platform where athletes, investors, Black and brown, women, people who are underestimated, underserved, undervalued, can have an opportunity to talk about all the great stuff that they were doing and build an ecosystem, around connecting, right? And building those bridges. And so, for me, I think, the theme to my life, and I think our company, is really, allowing young companies to accelerate themselves, allowing C-suites to be on cap tables, right? Allowing athletes and celebrities and influencers to have a seat at the table, and be a part of the creative, the biz dev, and really, creating this Business Inside the Game ethos and infrastructure where you walk into the door, that you're going to figure out, who you are and who you want to be.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. And I know that you were really early to the game on this, but I think that LA is really the hub of, it's the intersection between all of these, different communities, different backgrounds, like the sports world intersecting with all of the, more traditional kind of like and startup investing and things like that.
Yeah.
And do you get the sense that you being from LA kind of helped drive that perspective of you, or where do you think that came from?
Before I was here, before I got traded to the Clippers, I would play for the Golden State Warriors. So I did a lot of investing and hanging out and, figuring out what Silicon Valley, and that world looked like. So when I got traded to the Clippers, I think in 2009, my goal was to, do the same thing here in LA, because you had entertainment, you had sports, and everything kind of met in the middle. And I remember, early LA Tech startup days, like the first wave, LA Tech Mafia, I was trying to get them not to call themselves Silicon Beach. I was like, yo, we need to think of a different name, a different value system, right? Like we have we're so young that we have a great opportunity to, not be like how, traditional PE, VC, things like that were. We have an opportunity as LA, as a culture, to really like bring about this new form of collaboration, investing, and using all of our resources, right, to be a part of something bigger.
Did you end up coming up with a better name? We actually did a story back in, I think, March or April about exactly that, all the problems with the phrase Silicon Beach, but no one's quite been able to figure out like a better thing. So like, as someone who thought about that, do you have a preferred name to call it?
I had a ton of names back then. I pretty much gave up. People took Silicon Beach and ran with it. So, for me, I'm just kind of trying not to be labeled in that, and just, I would say, LA, for me, it's LA unified, right? LA should be unified, and not just, through a school district, but, we created LA UNFD to, as a brand, to like unify athletes and people like that. But, there is no, I don't know how to describe, LA outside of the fact that we all need to be unified, and we all need to be, dipping in the same pot, contributing to the same pot, because, a lot of times when, venture people or people come out here to start companies, right? Or people are out here saying like, oh, we're an LA company, but, there's people that have been here for 11, 12, 15 years, right? That have been grinding and will always get overlooked. And so what I don't want is, I don't want the same kind of the same Hollywood, trajectory where this industry grows, right? And just outside your doorstep, you have these incredibly beautiful kids with incredible minds. And, a lot of these companies are IPOing out of LA now. And where's the money going, right? So, for me, it's really about unifying this city so we understand how to pay it forward, how to pay it back, and how to build, a modern city and a smart city, right, where everybody can participate and everybody can share.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you work a lot on this kind of stuff, and it's something that, we really think of it as a big part of our mission to try to think, to try to make the LA ecosystem not just, this like Santa Monica, Venice, little bubble, but really like taking advantage of all of the different, backgrounds and perspectives and talent that's here. Mm-hmm. And there's a ton of stuff going on. Just yesterday, we talked about it a little earlier in this event, but Pledge LA, Grid 110, they just have this South LA Founders Fund that they have going on. I saw you speak at the South LA Impact Conference a few months ago. How do you think that we can continue to really build those bridges and make sure that the startup community serves the city as a whole, as opposed to just this small subsection of it?
Well, I think, since LA is still, I say still in its infancy, I think when you're looking at investors, right? I tweeted this morning, people don't really want to invest in the people that are really going to make a difference. You know what I mean? And that was just, a great American tweet that when all these corporate companies start divvying up this 200, 400, 300, they're going to give the money to the people that are not going to make a difference, right? Because they don't want to give the money to people who want to make a difference, right? Because if they did, they would build companies where they wouldn't have to rely on these corporate entities. So for me, so for me, I would say start there. Don't go for the hype. People are, there's a lot of people, like, just like in Hollywood, it's like you're going to keep giving the same star the same movies and the same deal, or the same producer goes from one studio to the next, and so we don't want to get into a space in LA where, we're also banking on, people that have not been successul, right? And banking on people who not only have not been successful, but have not paid it forward, right? So I think that, what we're doing with Business Inside the Game and what you're doing with dot.LA and a few other organizations out there that are really trying to bring everyone together is that we have to be, we have to set a mandate. We have to set a theme, and that's a big part of this, this brand around Silicon Beach. Is if you don't have a brand, if we're not branded in LA, then it's a free for all, right? And we're imitators. And the last thing that I think LA is an imitation city, even though we have Hollywood and things like that. But there's so much originality deep rooted in LA culture, and I feel like if these young companies that are starting, people are starting their companies here, moving here, to start their companies, we have to figure out, how do we create a brand and a structure and an opportunity for success for young entrepreneurs, especially people of color, especially women, especially LGBTQ, right? It's like, what are we doing, right, that is different than what has traditionally happened? And so, that's kind of like my mission, is to really like focus in on like, how can we all get together to create a value system, right? And a system of opportunity to privilege, but paying it forward, right? Where everybody has that opportunity for privilege. And so I think once LA gets to that point, and the smart investors or the big investors stop giving money to like people who, are wasting, they're good at spending other people's money and don't value it. We got to get some of these first timers in here and some of these people who are passionate, because you never know, when you have access to one person. and you do right by one person, what that could do for, you know, so many others.
Well, and Baron, I know that on a personal level, you practice what you preach on this. There's absolutely no way that you remember this, but I know your work with Camp Harmony back in the day.
You better stop it, dude. You better ask my.
Yeah. So I used to be a counselor there back in high school. For the listeners who don't know, it's this really awesome program that basically sets up a summer, and there's a winter camp too, up in Malibu for kids from like underprivileged backgrounds, and it's an awesome program. And Baron, I think you were on the Clippers at the time, but I remember you would come and like hoop with the kids, and I always really appreciated you'd tell them to listen to their counselors. So so I've always had a deep appreciation for you for that. But how do you think you can take that ethos and you know, really, like, whether you're an athlete in the community or whether you're a company or an executive, you talk about paying it forward. Like, how do you think that we can build more you know, sense of responsibility and you know, paying it forward and getting out into the community more?
I would say kind of shared resources, right? You know, looking at, I mean, I want to say thank you too for Camp Harmony, because, you know, I always say the kids who went to Camp Harmony are going to turn out to be great adults and successful people. And so, you know, shout out to Camp Harmony, because it took kids from privileged situations and put them, you know, with kids who had no privilege, right? And so that right there, the interaction on love, friendship, playing, learning, understanding each other. You know, I think for me, you know, I think I was like 5 or 6 years strong at Camp Harmony. And, you know, I would take my grandmother, who's not here anymore, but that was like our big thing, because, you know, one, we got to, you know, go do the ropes course and all that stuff. But it was more so like, for me, like, you guys treated my grandmother like a rock star more than me. And that was, you know, you know, Adam and the whole crew. But, you know, I say it's things like that, right? How do we pull together our resources? How do we pull together our intelligence, right? How do we pull together our technology, right? And how do we get people signed up, right? How do we get people involved? Right? And not just signed up, but like when you sign up, somebody is there to meet you at the door, right? Or when you sign up, somebody is there to follow you. When you sign up, somebody, you can have access to people or curriculum and things like that. And so right now, LA is, I keep saying this, in its infancy, and especially due to COVID. I mean, obviously our school systems were failing, right? Our educational systems needs to be rewritten, right? And so COVID has given us all these opportunities for these young minds to come and, you know, create and build, right? So I think the opportunity, you know, for all of us is to seek, find, deliver, and give access, right? And, you know, use some of the things that we have as the privilege, right, to share and build opportunities for the unprivileged.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's it. So you mentioned you know, how this year has kind of, you know, shaken things up, and obviously in many ways for the worst, but you know, it does, this new world that we're living in, and hopefully next year when things, you know, can start to go back to some form of normal, but we can change what that next normal is. Like, what are you most excited about for 2021, you know, in terms of, you know, in general, but also especially with, you know, these opportunities that you were just talking about?
Yeah, I would say the first thing I'm excited for is for COVID to be over. I'm sure we all are.
Yeah.
And to get back to, you know, whatever our new normal routine is. I'm excited about 2021 because we're actually going to start going out to raise money for BIG, to create our membership club, and to kind of light up our kind of masterclass curriculum for the privileged and the unprivileged, right? Giving people access through membership and membership sponsors. And then I would say the other thing I'm excited about is really just seeing like who is going to be our next class of companies that are coming through our accelerator incubator that we can highlight, right? So, and also excited about the companies that we invested in this year that are going to be, kind of like our featured showcase companies for next year. So, for me and for us, I think it's every time, and we're really small, but every time we can 5 to 10 investments a year, right? And we look the part and we are the part, I think it's just prepping us more. So when we go out, we can do more, so right now it's fun. It's fun to see, these entrepreneurs growing, but I'm also excited about what's new and what's next, especially here in LA.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. And please keep dot.LA in mind when as those companies all got things to announce. We would love to
absolutely
give some love. So that's awesome, and thank you so much, Baron. I mean, we're running a bit over, but there's one thing I really wanted to ask about. Just with this new, just the time of the year, we got Christmas coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about Black Santa?
Absolutely. I trademarked Black Santa, I would say over 6 years ago. And the goal was, I wanted my kids and my friends' kids to see a Santa Claus that was, not just Black, but that was hip and cool and modern and fun and, has an opportunity to be generational. So it was thinking about, what would Santa look like with an inclusive eye, right? And, when creating Black Santa, it was just all the things that we want to do now, all the things we want to be, all the things that we've forgotten about, right? And with Santa Claus and Christmas and how all that has become commercialized, I really looked and said, we need a Black Santa Claus because we need the world to see what we all look like through an inclusive eye. You know what I mean? And so that way nobody's alienated, right? And no one is, feel like they can't be involved. And so with that, we've been pumping out content. Our theme is Giving Has No Season. We partner with Solar Impact and a bunch of different charity organizations on the charity side to just do good. And then we sell our merchandise. We put out our content, and really in the spirit of just lifting people up, blessing someone. Giving has no season. Our theme for our company that owns the Black Santa trademark is you wish it, you dream it, it'll come true. And so just like a great company here out in Anaheim, Disney, right? We wanted to be the urban version and the multicultural storytelling version of what Disney was, and create characters, create stories that were, authentic from us or a remix by us, right? And that's the whole point, is to really gather and build an ecosystem and really just start, changing the way people think, right? And getting them to love and feel and have this emotional core. But also Black Santa's theme is Giving Has No Season. So, it lives year round. We live year round, and we're going to continue to do the work. So one, thank you for asking me that. It's Black Santa season. So blacksanta.com.
Black Santa. Well, I mean, yeah, well, as you just said, it's every season, but I hope the audience can check it out, maybe get some Black Santa merch, or at least the Black Santa, spirit in the next week or so.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get your merch, tag us, post us. It's so great because we got some young Crossroads kids here kind of running the show. So, my goal is to build something where, we can have these kids from LA kind of own in and, eventually become those C-suites and executives from our incubative company.
Awesome, man. Well, Baron, thank you so much for everything you do for the community. Thank you so much for spending your time here today. Really enjoyed talking with you, and
thank you.
Have a happy holidays, man.
Appreciate it, Sam. And shout out to Emily and Kelly for the previous one. they was chopping up big games. So that was, I was enjoying that.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Thanks,
All right,
Baron.
thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Sam and Baron, for that. I'm going to definitely check out the Black Santa merch. I clicked on the link that Annie sent through, so I still got some holiday shopping to do. So that's going to do it for us today. I want to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers, Mark, Emily, and Baron, and of course, Sam and Ben, for joining us today. Thank you for our audience for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to gather as a community one last time before we close out 2020 and hopefully have better things in 2021. If you want to share the event with anyone that wasn't able to attend, a playback is going to be available on our website by the end of the day. And of course, don't forget to check out the investor report that Ben mentioned. It's up on our site, and be on the lookout for a slew of exciting events that we have in store for you for 2021. So stay safe, and from the .LA team, please have a happy holidays this season.